What if I told you that before Moses received the tablets of the law, before Abraham looked to the sky and heard the divine promise, there already existed a God, an African God, revered by ancient peoples, in a time when the earth was still pure, free from human corruption, free from religious wars, free from political interference in the sacred? Can you imagine that? A deity forgotten by official history, but remembered in ancient chants, secret rituals, and hidden records that have survived. Time and persecution. A God who does not appear in textbooks, nor in edited versions of the scriptures. A divine name that echoed among ancient trees, in the ancestral deserts of Ethiopia, among the black civilizations that possessed spiritual wisdom long before organized religions emerged. Why doesn't anyone talk about this? Why have they hidden this mystery from humanity? Who would have an interest in erasing the memory of an African God who reigned when the earth was pure, in balance with the divine, in direct connection with the Creator? In this video, you're not just watching another theory. You're being invited to awaken, because the information I'm going to share here has been hidden for centuries, and it all begins with a name, a powerful name, a sacred name, a forgotten name. But before revealing that name, it's important that you understand what's at stake here. For millennia, African spirituality has been systematically discredited, demonized, and marginalized. Why? Because it carries an ancestral truth that doesn't fit the Western theological model. A truth that hasn't passed through the filter of the Vatican, nor the Roman councils that decided what you could or could not know about God. Africa is the cradle of humanity. Science has already recognized this. But is it also the cradle of divinity? Could it be that there, among the Kushite, Nubian, Aksumite, and Yoruba peoples, they were already communicating with God long before Moses ascended Mount Sinai? The evidence is compelling. There are ancient texts, millennia-old oral traditions, symbols carved in stone, and even accounts from historians that indicate the existence of a supreme African deity, a creator of the universe, ruler of heaven and earth, worshipped in silence, erased by time, but not forgotten by awakened souls. It is about this deity that we will talk today. And a word of caution, this video is not about religion. It's about revelation. It's about opening your eyes to a story that has been purposefully hidden, a story that might change everything you thought you knew about God, about your origins, about who you really are. Prepare to delve into a profound mystery, a mystery that has troubled those who have controlled the spiritual narrative for centuries. A mystery that has the power to reconnect you with a forgotten truth, the truth that the divine, too, was born in Africa. You will discover why this God was banished from the scriptures, silenced by conquerors, and almost erased from humanity's spiritual memory. But the question remains, are you ready to remember? Because once that memory awakens, it can no longer be erased. And from now on, you'll start to see the signs that are everywhere. In ancient texts, in forgotten ruins, in myths that have survived like whispers on the wind, waiting for someone to finally listen and understand. Now, let's go back in time, long before the Crusades, organized religions, dogmas, and divisions, to return to when the earth was still pure. Go back to the beginning of everything. Return to Him. But before we delve deeper into this mystery that has been carefully buried by history, I want to extend an invitation to you. If this content has sparked any questions or curiosity in you, share them with me in the comments. Tell me, have you ever heard of an African God before traditional religions? Do you believe there are spiritual truths that have been hidden from humanity? Your comment is not just an opinion, it's a form of resistance, a way of breaking the silence imposed for centuries. This is how we create a space where these revelations can be discussed without fear, with respect, depth, and awareness. And if this message resonates with you, leave a like right now. YouTube only shows videos like this to more people if you interact. Your like is what allows this mystery to reach others who also feel there's something beyond what's been told. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next revelations. Because this video is just the beginning. The journey to rediscover the African divine, the original God, the hidden creator, is only just beginning, and you'll want to be here when the next secrets are revealed. Let us continue together on this quest for ancestral truth, because what was forgotten will now be remembered. Before any scroll was written, before the first stone tablet was carved by human hands, even before the words Genesis, creation, or Garden of Eden arose in the mind of a Hebrew scribe, there was a world, a sacred, vibrant world, deeply connected to nature and the spiritual. And this world pulsed in the heart of Africa. We are talking about a time before the Bible, an ancestral time that did not depend on writing to preserve its wisdom, because it lived in the songs of the elders, in the stories of the griots, in the beats of the drums, and in the attentive eyes of the children who learned about the divine with their bare feet on the red earth. It was a time when spirituality was not imposed. It was lived, it was felt. It was the air, the water, the fire, the wind. The divine was in everything, and everything was within the divine. This time is what many call the era of the pure earth. But what does that really mean? In the oldest African tradition, predating any organized religion, it was believed that the world was created in perfect harmony with the spiritual. The idea of original sin did not exist. This is important to understand. Sin as a doctrinal concept would come much later, as a control mechanism. In that ancestral time, human beings were not seen as corrupted by nature, but rather as a direct extension of the sacred, a living spark of creation. The earth was pure because man still remembered who he was. He walked with his feet on the ground, but his consciousness was connected to the divine. He hunted with honor, harvested with gratitude, and prayed with his heart. There were no stone temples, but the mountains were sanctuaries. The rivers were oracles. The forests, true natural cathedrals. Purity was not the absence of error. It was the constant presence of the sacred in all things. It is in this context that the figure of the ancestral African god emerges, the one who existed before the written word. A god who did not need a name to be recognized because he was felt in the pulse of life. He was called by many names by different peoples, but all recognized him for his essence, the supreme creator, source of all, maintainer of cosmic balance. Imagine for a moment the absolute silence of an ancient African night, the stars twinkling in a clear sky, free of pollution, without artificial light. Around the fire, an elder begins a chant. He sings about the beginning, about how everything came from the same source, how the primordial sound created the elements, and how the spirit of the Creator is in every breath of life. Was this religion? No. This was memory. A memory so ancient that books could not contain it. Do you understand now why this God was erased? He didn't fit into the structures of religions of power. He didn't demand temples nor tithes, nor did he measure the value of a soul by rules. He asked for conscience. He demanded connection with the earth, with others, with the spirit. He was a free God who walked with men and not above them. And that was dangerous, because a spiritually free man is not easily dominated. And so, as empires rose, as religions organized themselves around dogmas and doctrines, this God was silenced. Oral traditions were treated as superstition. Drums were forbidden. Sacred rites were transformed into witchcraft. And little by little, the name of this God was erased from the collective memory. But all is not lost. Some African civilizations managed to preserve fragments of this pure knowledge. People like the Dogon of Mali, who had star maps without ever having used telescopes. The Yoruba, who speak of Olodumare as the source of everything, a concept incredibly close to the I Am revealed to Moses on Sinai. Or the Akan of Ghana, who speak of Nyame, the god of the sky, present in all living things. These traditions not only coexist with the idea of a supreme creator, but also reveal that this divinity predates the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. And if that's true, what else has been hidden from us? Could the so-called fall of man in Eden have actually been a forgetting of his divine origin? A break with his sacred ancestry? Because when man stopped looking inward and began looking outward, toward temples, religious authorities, systems of guilt and punishment, he disconnected himself from the earth and from the Creator who dwelt upon it. Think about it. The purity we speak of here is not a romantic idealization. It is a spiritual reality that has survived, camouflaged in the myths, symbols, dances, and tears of a people who were silenced but never erased. And that's what this video is trying to reclaim, the right to remember a land where the sacred was not negotiable, where the divine was free, where the African god walked among men and was not a distant concept, but a living, welcoming, powerful, and real presence. Perhaps now you are beginning to realize that what we call African mythology today may actually be humanity's oldest memory, a memory from when humankind was still light, from when the spirit had not been divided by religions, but rather flowed freely, intertwined with the wind, with fire, with the sound of rain falling on sacred leaves. Do you feel that way too? Do you feel something inside you vibrate when you hear these words? If you feel this way, then comment below. I remember. This phrase is more than a comment. It's an act of activation, of recognition. And take this opportunity to tell me, do you believe there was an African god before the Bible? I want to know your opinion. Answer in the comments and help me spread this hidden truth that needs to be brought to light. And now that you have your eyes turned to this ancestral time, to this earth that was still pure, we need to turn to the one who inhabited that time. The question that naturally arises after everything we have already discussed is, who was this original African god? What was his name? How was he seen by the ancients? What did he represent? And even more importantly, why was his name erased from history and replaced by names that are common in religious doctrines today? The journey for truth leads us directly to the heart of spiritual Africa, where the spoken word held power, and the name of a deity carried more than mere identification. It brought with it spiritual strength, cosmic meaning, and cultural identity. To speak the name of the Creator was like activating the vibration of creation within oneself. Therefore, the name of this original God was not spoken in just any way, nor at any time. It was a sacred, profound name, full of life. Among ancient peoples, this God was known by different names, but the essence was always the same. He was the beginning of everything, that which existed before time, he who was not created by anyone, but created everything. One of the oldest names preserved by oral traditions is Olodumare, which among the Yoruba people means something like the Almighty Lord, the owner of infinity, the supreme source of all existence. It is impressive to see how, even in cultures separated by thousands of kilometers and different languages, this idea of the supreme creator God is repeated with very similar traits. And here begins an extremely important point for our reflection. Why is it that the name Olodumare, for example, was never taught to us when we learned about spirituality, faith, or the origin of humanity? Why do we hear so much about Yahweh, El, Elohim, Jehovah, but so little about the ancestral names that preceded these titles in the African spiritual tradition? Yahweh, a name that appears in Hebrew tradition, is interpreted as He Who Is, or He Who Causes to Be. Elohim, in turn, is a plural form of El, and many scholars point out that this plurality may indicate something greater than a simple individual entity, perhaps a set of spiritual forces. However, when we look at names like Olodumare, Niame, Ama, Nzambi Mpungu, we realize that African cultures have recognized for millennia a single, sovereign, invisible, and at the same time omnipresent creator. A God who did not need to be represented by images because he was all that existed. These names are more than just phonemes. They are spiritual portals. Each sound, each syllable, carries within it a frequency that connects with the ancestral memory of the people. And that is very powerful, because when these names are said, something within the human being stirs. It's as if the soul, long dormant, begins to remember, to vibrate, to recognize a presence that has been there all along. But how do we know this? If traditional religious texts don't mention this original African god, the answer lies in oral traditions. In every village, in every ancestral community, there was always a guardian of the word, a griot, a storyteller, who, with wisdom and reverence, passed on ancient teachings to new generations. And in these accounts, the name of the Creator was always respected, invoked in rituals, mentioned at births, revered at the farewells of death. It was he who blessed the harvests, who sustained the winds, who guided the ancestors. In the absence of books, African tradition preserved its spirituality through speech, dance, music, and the vibration of the body in harmony with the soul. And that is where the true power lies. Because even without being recorded on paper, the name of the original African god lives on to this day in the songs of traditional peoples, in secret rituals, and in the dreams of those who still hear the call of the ancestor. Unfortunately, When the colonizers arrived, this living connection was treated as primitive, and African deities were reduced to lesser spirits, pagan entities, or simply erased from the spiritual map. But the truth, as always, endures. There is a living memory, and it still pulsates. Have you ever noticed that, even within modern religions, there is a deep longing for a more genuine connection with the divine? Many people feel that something is missing, that faith has been institutionalized, rigid, mechanized. Perhaps it's because, deep down, our spirit remembers a time when spirituality was free, fluid, vibrant, and that time is directly linked to the original God of Africa. The name you don't know is the name that can reconnect you, and that is why this topic is so sensitive, so powerful, so dangerous for some. Because recognizing that the Creator was already worshipped and revered long before the Hebrew or Christian scriptures means accepting that African spiritual knowledge is not inferior, but ancestral, that Africa is not only the cradle of physical humanity, but also the womb of divine consciousness. This God was not limited to a chosen people. He was the God of all, of the child born in the village, of the elder who taught under the tree, of the warrior who honored life, and of the mother who consecrated her milk to the spirit of creation. There were no walls, doctrines, sacred books, or impositions. There was only presence, a presence that can still be felt today by those who wish to remember. And you, can you feel it? Can you sense that perhaps your spirit is vibrating because something that was lost is resurfacing? If so, comment below. The sacred name lives. This phrase is more than a comment. It's a spiritual seal. It's like lighting an ancient flame that exists within you and needs to be rekindled now. And tell me also, which name of this ancestral God have you heard? Which one touches your heart the most? Sharing this is helping to keep alive a truth that many have tried to erase. Now that you know that there was an original African God, with sacred names that survived the passage of time, even while being stifled by imposed religious structures, we need to delve even deeper into the spiritual atmosphere in which this God was worshipped. Imagine for a moment a reality where humankind had not yet forgotten its essence. A time when there were no boundaries between the visible and the invisible, between heaven and earth, between spirit and matter. This is the time we are talking about when we say, when the earth was still pure. But what does this expression, pure land, really mean? Of course, we're not talking about purity in the modern moralistic sense, where everything is divided between right and wrong, sin and virtue. No, this purity was something else. It was a spiritual frequency. It was a state of connection so profound with the divine that everything around vibrated in the same harmony. The earth was pure because man had not yet lost his connection with the Creator. He knew where he came from, he knew why he existed, and more than that, he felt it. This purity was not an absence of challenges or difficulties, but rather a full presence of spiritual awareness. It was as if everything was aligned. The winds, the waters, the animals, the stars, the bodies, and the spirits. There was respect for all that lived, because everything was sacred. The sacred was not something separate from daily life. It was daily life. In this context, it's impossible not to draw parallels with the concept of the Garden of Eden. When we think of Eden, the image that comes to mind is that of a perfect, abundant place where humankind lived in harmony with nature, with animals, and with God. But what if I told you that Eden wasn't a physical place, but a state of consciousness? What if this narrative that has reached us, shaped by translations, interpretations, and interests, was merely an echo of a much older memory, born in the hearts of African peoples? Think about it. Eden was a garden, a living space, green, connected to the elements. Water sprang from the earth. Animals lived alongside humans. There was no pain, no guilt, no separation. Now compare that to how ancient African spiritual traditions described the world. The earth as mother, the sky as father, the elements as divine children, the animals as siblings, and humankind as guardian. It's as if spiritual Africa was already living in Eden before it was described by any prophet. This is precisely the period that many spiritual scholars call the Golden Age of African spirituality, an era in which there were no intermediaries between the human being and the divine. Prayer was done with the body, with dance, with the beating of the heart. Meditation was done by observing the flight of a bird, the movement of the waters, the cadence of the wind in the leaves. Spirituality was not separate from life. It was the very pulse of existence. Back then, men and women knew the cycles of the moon not out of superstition, but because they felt its influence in their blood, their emotions, and the harvest. They knew when to plant and when to harvest because they read the signs of nature as one reads a sacred book. Fire was not just a tool, it was a spirit with which they conversed. Water was not just for drinking, it was a messenger, a healer, a mirror of the soul. The earth was not just soil, it was a living womb that gave and demanded respect. This was the world where the original African god was worshipped. It wasn't blind adoration, but a living and organic relationship with the sacred. Rituals didn't exist to ask things of a distant entity, but to maintain the balance between all things. When someone fell ill, the question wasn't just what was wrong with the body, but what had been broken in the connection with the spirit, with the ancestors, with nature. Everything was seen as part of a living system. And this profound and integrated worldview is not romanticization. It is ancestral wisdom, a wisdom that was interrupted but not destroyed. There are still communities that live with vestiges of this consciousness, even if in silence, even if hidden from the eyes of the modern world, that believes spirituality needs buildings, dogmas, and written rules. In the Pure Land, what governed life was not the fear of hell, but the love of harmony. Heaven was not a place one went to after death, but a reality that manifested itself here and now, when man lived in truth with his essence. And that's why this golden age of African spirituality is so important to rediscover, not just as a historical curiosity, but as a path of return, because the modern world, with all its technology and information, is more spiritually lost than ever. People are thirsty for meaning, hungry for real connection, and perhaps the answer lies not in a new dogma, but in an old path, a path back to the purity of the earth. A path where the divine is in the small things, in the sound of the drum, in the song of the night, in conscious breathing, in reverence for all that lives. A path where the Creator is not trapped on an invisible throne, but walks beside us, as He always has, since that forgotten time. If all of this makes sense to you, tell me in the comments. I want to return to the purity of the earth. Write that down. Activate that memory within yourself, and share with me. At what point in your life did you feel most connected to nature and spirituality? Your answer can inspire others who are beginning to awaken. For all that we have discussed so far to be preserved, the memory of a still pure earth, the presence of the original God, the sacred names, the direct connection with the elements and nature, more than faith was needed. Spiritual responsibility was required, a deep commitment to the transmission of wisdom. And this is where we enter one of the most sacred aspects of this entire tradition, the guardians of knowledge. These guardians were not chosen for status or power. They did not hold religious positions as we see them today, with human hierarchies and structures of political authority. No, they were chosen by the Spirit. The calling did not come from men. It came from the invisible, from the ancestor, from the Creator Himself. These guardians took many forms. They were the shamans connected to the forces of nature and the spiritual worlds, with the ability to see beyond what the eyes can see. They were the priests and priestesses responsible for maintaining the balance between the community and the sacred. And they were also the griots, the storytellers, who carried in their words the living memory of all that could not be written. The griot, often seen merely as a teller of legends, was in fact a true living archive of ancestry. In their words there was not only poetry, there was history, there was mystery, there was revelation. They were able to reconstruct entire lineages, to narrate events from centuries past with details that surpass the logic of our Western time. And this is because they did not tell stories for the sake of telling them. They preserved the spirit of history in every sound, in every pause, in every song. Shamans, in turn, were messengers between worlds. Through sacred rituals, herbs, drums, music, and dance, they connected with ancestors, guardian spirits, and the Creator Himself. They knew that there are unseen worlds that directly influence our own. They knew that physical illness can reflect a disconnection from the soul, that a barren field might not be merely a matter of agriculture, but of unbalanced spiritual energy. Therefore, every gesture, every symbol, every sound in the rituals had a purpose. Nothing was random. Nothing was meaningless. The priests were the ones who cared for the sacred in the daily life of the community. They organized rites of passage, blessed births, accompanied mourners, and ensured that natural cycles were respected. They knew how to read the signs of nature like an open book. They knew when the rains would speak, when the silence of the birds announced changes, when the moon called for retreat or expansion. And these guardians, each with their own function, formed an invisible spiritual network that sustained the lives of their people for centuries. But the most extraordinary thing about all this is that these mysteries were not accumulated for dominion or control. They were passed down from generation to generation, from master to disciple, from grandmother to granddaughter, from father to son, always with respect, always with ritual, always with reverence. It wasn't simply telling a story. It was activating a memory. It was transmitting a code of the soul. There were teachings that could only be passed on at certain times in life. Some could only be revealed after specific dreams, after signs from ancestors. Others required initiations, retreats, tests of courage, fasts, sacred baths. All this because spiritual knowledge was not considered just any information, but a living force. And living force needs preparation to be carried. These mysteries spoke of the creation of the world, the role of humankind, the destiny of the soul after death, cosmic cycles, and spiritual realms. And most impressively, many of these teachings are so ancient and profound that they coincide with truths only recently discovered by modern science, such as the influence of energy fields, the vibration of words, and the mind-body connection. But with the arrival of foreign religions and processes of spiritual colonization, these guardians began to be persecuted. Shamans were called sorcerers, priestesses were labeled witches, griots were silenced, and so, little by little, one of the greatest sources of spiritual wisdom on the planet began to be erased. Even so, the spirit endures, because the true guardian of knowledge is not the one who imposes themselves. It is the one who keeps it in silence, who waits for the right time, who transmits it with love. And much of this knowledge has survived hidden between the lines, in ancestral songs, in the rituals of traditional communities that have remained strong despite oppression. Today there is a deep thirst in people for reconnection, and this reconnection can only happen when we recover the threads that connect us to the guardians of wisdom. That is why looking to them is not just looking to the past, it is looking to the future of spirituality. You may not have been initiated into any ritual, perhaps you have never participated in an ancestral ceremony, but if you feel something inside you vibrate when you hear these words, then know this: the memory is alive within you as well. And this is what those ancient masters knew, that one day, even in the most distant generations, even in lands where their names were no longer known, the soul of the people would awaken again. And in this awakening, the stories would be told again, the names would be spoken again, the chants would echo again, and the sacred would return to occupy the place it should never have lost, within the human heart. If this part of the journey touched you in any way, tell me in the comments. I am a guardian of memory. This phrase is a calling, a recognition, a pact with everything that is yet to come. And if you have heard, lived, or witnessed any stories about elders who carried sacred wisdom, write them below. Sharing these stories is keeping the cycle alive. From the moment we understand that there was an era of spiritual purity, where the presence of the Creator was a reality lived and felt in every gesture, every breath, every beat of the ancestral drum, we are faced with an essential question: who kept this connection alive? Who preserved the sacred teachings when the world began to forget? And it is here that we enter an even deeper and often ignored dimension: the guardians of knowledge. These guardians are not characters from stories or symbolic figures. They existed, exist, and will continue to exist as long as there is a single soul willing to remember. They were the shamans who dialogued with the invisible, the priests and priestesses who guided the rituals of harmony, and the griots who carried the living word of ancestry. None of them needed books. Knowledge was passed on through voice, rhythm, body, and silence. It was a wisdom that was not taught only with words, but with presence. Imagine an elder sitting beneath an ancient tree, surrounded by attentive children. He begins to tell a story, but it is no ordinary story. Each word he utters activates layers of consciousness. Each metaphor carries a symbol. Each pause contains a teaching. The griot does not merely tell, he transmits, he vibrates. He reconnects listeners with the earliest sounds of the world. In the African spiritual tradition, the word has a soul, and when it is used purposefully, it becomes a bridge between time and eternity. These griots, considered living libraries, knew exactly when and how to release the mysteries. Not everything was said at once. There were levels, there was maturity, there was spiritual preparation. Because mysteries are not entertainment, they are revelations, and every revelation demands responsibility. Alongside them, shamans, also called ancestral healers or mediums, had the ability to access subtle dimensions of reality. They not only saw beyond the physical, they navigated between worlds. In sacred rituals, they could enter trance states induced by rhythmic sounds, power plants, or specific prayers, and there they received direct instructions from the spiritual world. They communicated with ancestors, consulted guardian spirits, and received messages from the Creator himself. Often, they returned from these altered states of consciousness with predictions, spiritual diagnoses, answers that no one else could offer. And it wasn't illusion, it was spiritual science. Priests and priestesses, on the other hand, were the ones who maintained organized spiritual relationships, not in the sense of hierarchy as we see in modern dogmatic religions, but as guardians of cosmic order. They understood the natural cycles, knew the right times to plant, harvest, fast, dance, celebrate, and remain silent. At each stage of the year, there was a ritual, a reverence, an activation. Each element of nature, water, fire, wind, earth, had its moment, its offering, its song. In these rituals, the presence of the Creator was invoked not as something external and distant, but as something intimate and present. When the drum beat, when the body danced in spirals, when the chants echoed in unison with the forest, the sacred descended. The people felt it. Their eyes shone, their skin tingled, and their souls remembered. There were rituals for birth, where the child was presented to the ancestors and received their sacred name. There were rituals for the beginning of adolescence, where the young person was prepared for adult life with spiritual wisdom. There were initiation rites, where the initiate spent days and nights in isolation, receiving secrets that could not be told to just anyone. There were ceremonies to honor the dead, where it was said that the spirit did not go far away, but returned to guide and protect the community. Everything was sacred, nothing was accidental, and more than that, these rituals were not to worship a distant deity, but to honor the presence of the Creator who lives in everything and everyone. Unlike religions structured on fear of punishment, fear of damnation, fear of separation, the oldest African spiritual traditions were based on trust, on intimacy with the divine, on the certainty that God is not against us. He is with us. These guardians knew that as time passed, external forces would try to erase this wisdom. And so, many of the deepest mysteries were hidden in seemingly simple stories, in songs sung to lull babies to sleep, in symbols drawn on the walls of houses or on everyday objects. They disguised the sacred to protect it, because they knew that oppression would come, that books would be burned, that natural temples would be desecrated, and that their names would be turned into a curse. But the memory survived. Today, each person who awakens to this reality is like a seed being reactivated, and that's too important to ignore, because we're not just retrieving information, we're reactivating frequencies. We're reconnecting with a spiritual field that never ceased to exist, but which has been dormant for a long time. These guardians did not want to create an empire, a church, a religion. They wanted to keep the bridge between heaven and earth alive. They knew that the human soul needs to remember where it came from to know where it is going. And so, they passed everything on with zeal, with care, with truth. You who are listening to this now, you may feel that something inside you vibrates differently. Perhaps you have never heard these words before with such clarity, but somehow it feels like you already knew them. And that is exactly how the calling works. What is true does not need to be taught, only remembered. If this resonates with you, if these words are touching you in some way, write below, "I am an heir of the guardians." This phrase is a key. It declares to the universe that you are ready to remember. And if you know someone who carries this kind of wisdom, a grandfather, a mother, an uncle, a master, a friend who taught you something that seemed bigger than life, share it in the comments. Let's make this network of remembrance grow. Now that we understand who the guardians of ancestral knowledge were, and how they kept the connection with the sacred alive through rituals, oral wisdom, and profound spiritual practices, we enter a delicate point, perhaps the most provocative of this entire journey: the silence of the scriptures about these earlier gods, especially about the original African god. And here it is necessary to have the courage to look beyond the veil, to question what has been imposed as absolute truth, and to see between the lines of what is present but has never been honestly explained. The Bible, as we know it today, is a collection of books selected, edited, translated, and organized by human hands over centuries. And what few stop to consider is that in this process, much was left out, and what remained was adapted to a purpose. We are not talking here about denying the spiritual value of the scriptures, but rather about recognizing that there are silences that scream, and these silences often hide clues to the gods who came before. When we open the biblical texts with attentive eyes and an awakened spirit, we realize that there are indirect quotations, fragments, references, and even strange indications that point to the existence of other deities that preceded the Hebrew God. An intriguing example is the use of the word Elohim in Genesis. It appears in the plural. Yes, plural. Let us make man in our image. Wow. Who are these our? Why would a supreme deity speak in the plural? For centuries, theologians have tried to justify this linguistic choice. But for those who study spirituality more deeply, this is a clear clue that there was an awareness of multiple divine entities in the ancestral imagination. Another curious point is the figure of Melchizedek, mentioned in Genesis as king of Salem and priest of the Most High God, long before Abraham. The text mentions him, but does not explain his origin. Where did this priest come from? Who was this Most High God he served? Why does he bless Abraham, given that, theoretically, the true God had not yet fully revealed himself to him? These are questions that the narrative simply skirts around, as if it were not convenient to delve into them. And when something is not explored in depth in the scriptures, we need to ask ourselves, is it because it wasn't important, or because it was dangerous? This pattern of silencing the spiritual past prior to the Hebrew tradition is recurrent. Entire civilizations that had their own beliefs, their own gods, and ways of connecting with the divine are reduced to the expression pagan peoples. The term pagan, incidentally, is a later invention, used to disqualify everything that did not fit into the Western monotheistic model. Thus, African, Eastern, Amerindian gods all were lumped together, demonized, forgotten, dehumanized. Now stop and think with me. If the Bible is a book so concerned with describing genealogies, dates, names, and places with precision, why doesn't it mention African gods, considering that the African continent was already the cradle of ancient civilizations long before the existence of the Hebrews? Could it be because they didn't exist? Or could it be because acknowledging them would mean admitting that divine revelation wasn't exclusive to one people? Throughout the centuries, there has been a clear effort to erase deities that did not fit into the power discourse that formed around the dominant religions. African pantheons, for example, were ignored or transformed into inferior myths. Female divine figures, like many that existed in matriarchal African cultures, disappeared completely, replaced by a male, patriarchal, and vengeful deity. But even so, there are hidden parallels. Many scholars point to striking similarities between certain figures in African spirituality and biblical characters. For example, the concept of Olodumare, the supreme god of the Yoruba people, is extremely similar to the creator god of Genesis, invisible, omnipotent, above all other spiritual beings. Other African deities associated with justice, thunder, and fertility appear in oral narratives with characteristics very close to figures like Moses, Elijah, or even John the Baptist. The difference is that in the Bible, everything is centralized in a single culture, while in the African tradition, the sacred was plural, diverse, and deeply rooted in the land and the spirit. This deliberate concealment of the former gods was not merely a spiritual process, it was also political. By controlling the spiritual narrative, one also controls the identity of a people. And when the gods of a civilization are erased, their memory, their self-esteem, their connection to the divine are also erased. And that is precisely why bringing these questions to light is not just an act of research, it is an act of healing. It is looking at the scriptures with open eyes, without fear, without guilt, without dogma, and asking oneself, what is missing here? What has been removed? What has been rewritten? If you feel these questions are unsettling, that's good. Restlessness is the first step to awakening, because there is no spiritual liberation without questioning. What imprisons you is not doubt, it's blind certainty. If the Creator is truly supreme, He does not fear questions. He desires that His children seek, that they investigate, that they not accept things simply because they were said by men in pulpits or inscribed on ancient papyri. The truly sacred is not offended by questioning. It reveals itself through it. Perhaps that's why you're here now, listening to these words, because within you already exists the seed of sacred doubt, and this seed, when watered with courage, transforms into awareness, and it is this awareness that leads us to reclaim what has been erased, to remember that the African creator who existed before the Bible has not disappeared. He has been hidden, concealed between the lines, disguised as myth, but he still lives in the vibration of the drum, in the word of the elder, in the silence of the forest, in the hearts of those who have not forgotten. If all of this resonated with you, write in the comments, I hear what the Bible didn't say. Share your reflections as well. Have you ever felt that there was something more beyond what you were taught? Have you noticed this strange silence in the scriptures? Share your perception below, because your comment may awaken another soul. From the moment we understand that the gods prior to the biblical tradition not only existed, but were intentionally silenced for greater interests, we now enter one of the darkest and most necessary parts of this journey, the fall and oblivion of the African sacred. Because what was done to the original African god was not just theological negligence. It was a systematic project of spiritual colonization, a meticulous operation aimed not only at controlling bodies, but above all, at dominating minds, souls, and memories. For millennia, African peoples related to the divine in a direct, organic, and vibrant way. They knew that it wasn't necessary to traverse stone temples or human authorities to connect with the Creator. Heaven was within. Nature was an extension of the Spirit. The forests, the rivers, the mountains, and the winds spoke of God in their own language. And each people had its own way of naming this presence, of revering it with chants, rituals, dances, silently or in collective celebrations. Spirituality was communal, but profoundly intimate. But with the arrival of the first foreign invasions, this connection began to break down. Colonization didn't just come with swords and ships. It came with sacred books in hand, promises of salvation, and a language that seemed celestial but concealed a diabolical plan to erase the spiritual identity of an entire people. What was once called divine came to be called demonic. The gods who protected them came to be described as forces of evil, and the African god, creator of all, was replaced by imported figures with strange names, foreign features, and doctrines that did not respect time, the body, blood, ancestors, or sacred soil. Forced conversion was not an act of faith, it was a spiritual attack. The colonizers knew that the true power of a people lies in their spirituality, because whoever controls what someone believes controls everything that person feels, thinks, does, accepts, and endures. They knew it was necessary to remove God from the African people in order to enslave them more easily. Because a people who know they are divine, who were born of the Creator, who carry the sacred in their own blood, never bow down easily. And so the ancient altars were destroyed, the drums silenced, the sacred words banished from mouths, the rituals forbidden, the elders persecuted, and the stories rewritten by hands that never knew the African soul. Thousands of years of living spirituality were encapsulated in silence. And the most perverse thing? They made Africa's own children believe that what they felt from a young age was sin, that what came from their grandparents was superstition, that what inhabited their bodies was unworthy. It's as if a deep fog has been cast over the spiritual memory of Black people, an induced forgetting, an intentional disconnection, a spiritual amnesia forged with violence and doctrine. The impact of this is visible even today. How many descendants of Africans live ashamed of their roots? How many are afraid of the names of the Orishas, the entities, the ancient deities, without ever having truly studied what they mean? How many reject their ancestral traditions without knowing that they are rejecting themselves? And even more painful, how many kneel before a foreign god, believing that salvation lies only there, while denying the sacred that pulsates in their own blood? It's as if spiritual colonization has built an invisible wall between Black people and their true divine origin. A wall that separates, that weakens, that makes faith dependent on external structures and no longer on an inner connection. A wall that not only hides the past, but distorts the present. And when you take away a people's spirituality, you don't just erase their history, you break their identity. Because spirit is the backbone of existence. Everything is born from it. The way someone sees the world, themselves, their value, their strength, their capacity to resist and to dream, all of this is rooted in spirituality. Therefore, the erasure of the African god was not a simple cultural forgetting. It was a theft of identity. But not all was lost. Because even under the weight of oppression, even with centuries of persecution, the flame never completely went out. In the Quilombos, in isolated communities, in songs that crossed oceans, in whispered prayers, in hidden herbs, in drumbeats disguised as celebrations, African spirituality endured. Like a sleeping seed, it waited. It waited for the time to return to the light. And perhaps that time is now. When you hear these words and feel something pulsing within you, know this. It's not just emotion, it's memory. It's the soul remembering who it is. It's the spirit awakening to what has always been there. Because the African creator never disappeared. He was only silenced. But now he is being remembered, invoked, acknowledged. This is the true spiritual reparation the world needs. It's not about rejecting the new, but about recognizing what has been unjustly taken away. It's about healing the wound of forgetfulness with the truth of remembrance. And this healing doesn't begin in temples or pulpits. It begins within. When you look in the mirror and understand that there is an ancient, powerful, vibrant light within you, waiting to be reconnected to the whole. If you've made it this far and felt something within you begin to stir, tell me in the comments, I reconnect with my divine origin. Write it down, declare it. Because words have power. Because every word you consciously release activates real energy in the spiritual world. And tell me also, at what point in your life did you feel that your faith was distant from who you truly are? Have you ever felt that you believed in something that didn't speak to your soul? Your story can be the mirror that another needs to recognize themselves. After understanding the fall and forgetting of the African god and how spiritual colonization erased centuries of ancestral wisdom, we now need to turn to that which endures. Because even when they tried to silence the African creator, the truth did not disappear completely. It left traces, subtle signs that have traversed time, resisting censorship, the destruction of books, and cultural repression. This evidence is scattered throughout history, waiting to be rediscovered, analyzed, and understood by those who seek more than just the official narrative. There are archaeological inscriptions in places that few people imagine hold ancient spiritual knowledge. Engraved stones, mysterious symbols, sculptures representing African divine entities. All this evidence shows that ancient peoples had a much deeper awareness of the divine than official history usually admits. Some of these records seem to indicate rituals invoking the original god, where the natural elements, water, fire, earth, and air, were considered sacred and were used to harmonize the community with the cosmos. And the most incredible thing is to realize that these inscriptions were not isolated, but were repeated in different regions of Africa, suggesting a unified tradition, a shared spiritual memory that crossed tribes, cultures, and centuries. Forgotten texts also carry impressive revelations. Some manuscripts, often considered apocryphal, mention deities that preceded well-known biblical figures. The Book of Enoch, for example, recounts encounters with angels and celestial beings that do not appear in canonical texts, describing knowledge that aligns with ancestral African spirituality, including the idea of a creator god who ruled the earth when it was still pure. Lost psalms, Gnostic texts, and fragments of writings that were not incorporated into the modern Bible present similar themes. A supreme divinity that is not limited to a specific people, that does not submit to restrictive dogmas, but that manifests itself in all of creation, in nature, in the stars, in the waters, in the life of every human being. Ancient explorers also recorded these traditions, albeit superficially. Accounts from travelers who reached distant African communities describe cults, ceremonies, and rites that seemed to defy the logic of the European Christian world of the time. They observed that the spirituality of these cultures was deeply intertwined with daily life and that spiritual leaders, shamans, priests, and griots maintained a direct relationship with what they called the supreme god. Although explorers attempted to reduce these practices to superstition or folklore, their descriptions record the essence of a faith that was never destroyed. Each song, each dance, each ritual gesture is, in fact, a living reminder of what history has tried to erase. The tribal traditions that have survived the test of time are perhaps the most powerful evidence. In every corner of Africa, we find rituals that still carry fragments of ancestral knowledge, sacred dances that mimic the movements of creation, chants that evoke ancestral energies, celebrations that respect the cycles of the moon, the sun, and the rains. Each of these elements carries within it a memory of when the African god was publicly recognized, not only in isolated communities, but as a universal presence, a creative force that permeated all life. The resilience of these traditions is proof that, even under centuries of erasure, the sacred has found ways to survive and remains present in the hearts of those who have the sensitivity to perceive it. And more than that, this evidence begins to reveal something even deeper, connections between different cultures and ancient texts that show that the memory of the African god was not limited to Africa. There are surprising parallels with concepts from the Book of Enoch, with certain lost psalms, and even with Gnostic texts that circulated among Jewish, Christian, and Middle Eastern communities. This indicates that the original knowledge was universal, but was systematically reinterpreted and appropriated by different groups, always with the intention of controlling the narrative about who had access to the truth. This manipulation explains why so many ancient teachings appear fragmented, like distant echoes of a time when the divine was fully understood and accessible to all. What this evidence shows us is that ancestral African spirituality was neither an accident nor a forgotten superstition. It is a direct line of knowledge, a thread connecting generations, crossing geographical boundaries, and always linked to the original God who existed before the Bible, before the Torah, before any official document that attempted to centralize faith. And most importantly, these traditions survive because they were preserved with intention and respect, passed down orally from generation to generation, in rituals, stories, songs, dances, and sacred gestures that still echo in villages, towns, and even urban centers, often invisible to those who only look at the surface. When you realize this, you begin to understand what's at stake when we talk about rescuing African spiritual memory. It's not about studying something ancient merely out of curiosity, but about reconnecting with a living wisdom that carries the essence of creation, the presence of the divine in everything and everyone, and the capacity to reactivate a forgotten consciousness within us. Because each inscription, each lost text, each surviving tradition is, in fact, a bridge that connects us to what official books have tried to silence, and that reminds us that the African god never ceased to exist, even when he seemed invisible. If you are feeling this connection, write in the comments, "I see the living memory." Share if you already knew of any ancestral tradition that still preserves this knowledge. Tell me also, have you ever felt in a ritual or chant the presence of something that seemed bigger than you, something that didn't fit into the official narrative of history? Your experiences help others realize that they are not alone in this spiritual awakening. As we advance on this journey of discovery, we realize that the story we were told about the divine is only a part of what really happened. The hidden evidence, the forgotten records, and the traditions that survived begin to reveal something surprising. African deities and the Hebrew God may have much more connected origins than we were ever taught. It is no coincidence that concepts of a supreme, omnipresent, and creator God appear in cultures so distinct and distant in time and space. This leads us to a delicate and provocative question. If ancestral African spirituality has so many parallels with what is recorded in the Bible, why has this information never been popularized? Why was the story told in a way that erased the presence of the African God, while the Hebrew God is exalted as unique and exclusive? When we analyze ancient texts, both from African tradition and biblical records, we realize that many of the attributes ascribed to the Hebrew God, omnipotence, universal, presence, the capacity to judge and create, already existed in African traditions long before the Bible was compiled. The African creator, under the names Olodumare, Nyame, Amma, or Nzambi Mpungu, possessed the same essential characteristics: absolute sovereignty, a direct connection with nature, responsibility for cosmic balance, and closeness to humankind, allowing for a direct relationship without hierarchical intermediaries. This similarity is not a coincidence. It is the mark of an ancestral memory that was systematically hidden. The reason why this information was kept secret is complex and painful. Over the centuries, religious leaders realized that acknowledging African influence on fundamental spiritual concepts could undermine the authority they sought to centralize around the Hebrew tradition and its human intermediaries. To admit that African peoples already knew a supreme God even before the Bible was written would be to admit that spiritual knowledge is not the exclusive property of any institution, any temple, any elite. This would mean that ordinary people in any corner of the world could connect directly with the divine without the mediation of leaders, priests, or clergy. And obviously, this possibility threatened the power structure of the church throughout history. This is why there are gaps, silence, and deliberate censorship. Documents that could reveal these connections have been ignored, hidden, reinterpreted, or even destroyed. Alternative scholars and theologians who dared to investigate these relationships were discredited, often treated as heretics or marginalized theorists. But at the same time, their work continues to exist, and their findings show that there is a continuous line between African spirituality and the Hebrew narrative. Both speak of a God who is creation and creator, who governs and protects, who is present in heaven and on earth, and who seeks a direct connection with humankind. What these scholars also reveal is something even more disturbing. The concealment wasn't just about the past, but also about the present impact of this truth. If people recognized that ancestral African spirituality is a legitimate source of knowledge about the divine, the spiritual world as we know it would change completely. This would explain why so many African practices have been demonized, marginalized, and labeled as superstition or witchcraft. All of this was part of a conscious effort to delegitimize the African spiritual connection and maintain a monopoly on religious knowledge. And that is precisely why it is so important to re-establish these connections. Because when we understand that the African God is the same God that the Bible describes, although translated and reinterpreted, we begin to realize that the erasure is not natural, but intentional. We begin to understand that there is a spiritual heritage that needs to be recovered, that knowledge about the divine was never restricted to sacred books or temples, but was experienced directly by entire cultures, with respect, reverence, and profound awareness. The relationship between these deities and the Hebrew God also shows us that the concept of creation, balance, justice, and universal care is not exclusive to one people or religion, but rather a cosmic truth that transcends cultures, withstands time, and remains alive in the rituals, traditions, and songs of each African tribe that maintained a connection with the divine. These traditions, even hidden, are lines of light that guide us back to understanding who we truly are and who God is. And that's precisely why this video isn't just about history, nor about spiritual curiosity. It's about awakening. It's about realizing that everything that has been silenced is waiting for us, ready to be remembered, recognized, and incorporated into our own spiritual lives. Because the deeper the imposed silence, the more powerful the memory that endures. And that memory is alive, pulsating, ready to reconnect you with the original African creator. If you feel that these revelations are stirring something within you, tell me in the comments. I want to know the hidden truth. Also write if you had already noticed any parallels between African spirituality and the Bible. Your comments help strengthen this network of living memory and spiritual awakening. After understanding what the Bible omitted, the parallels between African deities and the Hebrew God, and the role of the guardians of ancestral wisdom, we begin to perceive something profound. This changes everything you thought about God and spirituality. Until now, the narrative presented to us about divinity seemed linear, uniform, controlled by rules, books, and human authorities. But when we bring to light the connection with ancestral Africa, the picture is completely transformed. The original African god, the one who existed when the earth was still pure, is not limited to temples, scriptures, or hierarchies. He is a living, multifaceted presence that transcends cultures, times, and geographical boundaries. This is a revelation that can shake old beliefs, but also open doors to a deeper, more intimate, and more authentic spiritual experience. To understand this new perspective, we first need to look at African spirituality as it truly is. Not a superstition, not a myth, not a secondary religion, but a deep and structured tradition based on a direct connection with the divine, on the observation of nature, and on the living memory of the ancestors. Olodumare, Nyame, Ama, Nzambi Mapungu. Each name represents aspects of the Creator, of creation, and of the relationship with humankind. But it's not just about names or titles. It's about understanding that the divine is plural in manifestation, but one in essence. This God is creator, sustainer, guide, and witness, but is also a force present in every tree, every river, every star, and every human heart that seeks the truth. And it is precisely here that reconnecting with the ancestral sacred becomes transformative. When we recognize that our African ancestors already had a direct and organic understanding of the divine, we begin to realize that God is not something imposed from the outside, but something that can be experienced from within. Spirituality is not restricted to books or temples. It is a living experience that transcends generations, cultures, and rituals. And when you connect with this ancestral memory, you begin to feel that the sacred is not only in the distant sky, but within your own body, pulsating in your breath, in your energy, in your capacity to love, to create, and to perceive the world consciously. This perception also teaches us that God is multifaceted. He cannot be limited to a single interpretation, a single name, or a single culture. The African God, like the Hebrew God, is the same universal essence, but manifests in different ways depending on who observes him, where they are, and how they connect. This understanding breaks down cultural, racial, and historical barriers and reminds us that the sacred is greater than any institution, doctrine, or official narrative. It is universal and inclusive, ready to be recognized by any human being willing to awaken. When this truth begins to be internalized, our relationship with the divine changes completely. No longer a distant, cold, or restrictive God, no longer a spirituality limited to dogmas and human rules, but a God who walks with us, who teaches us through nature, music, dance, rituals, silence, ancestors, and life itself. A God who is simultaneously creator and presence, mentor and vital energy, witness and guardian. A God who reminds us of our own divinity, of the potential for light that dwells within each of us. And when you realize this, a responsibility also arises, the responsibility to remember, to rescue, to honor this spiritual heritage. Because the forgetting was not natural, it was imposed. And now, as we awaken, we are called to repair, to reactivate, and to transmit it forward. Just as the griots, priests, and shamans of the past guarded and transmitted knowledge, we too can become bearers of this light, keeping alive the memory of the original African God, recognizing his presence in us and in the world around us. This reconnection brings clarity to many aspects of our modern lives. It helps us understand our roots, value our ancestry, and realize that spirituality is not something that began or ended in a book or a specific religion. It is a continuous line of consciousness that spans millennia and still pulsates in every ritual, every chant, every preserved African tradition. And the more we open ourselves to this perception, the more we feel we are awakening to something that has always been within us, waiting to be remembered and experienced. Can you feel this presence? Can you perceive that the God you knew in a limited way may in fact be much vaster, much more inclusive, much more present? That ancestral African spirituality is not a historical curiosity, but a living key to understanding divinity in its universal essence. If you feel this, if something within you vibrates and connects with this reality, tell me in the comments. I recognize the universal presence of God. Also write if you have ever felt, even without knowing it, that the divine transcends cultural and religious boundaries. Your experiences are important, and sharing them helps others awaken as well. And if you've made it this far, it means your curiosity and thirst for truth are truly awakened. This is incredible. because few people have the patience and courage to go through this entire journey to the end. And that's exactly why I want to extend a special invitation to you. Subscribe to the channel now, activate the bell, and become part of the community that is rediscovering the truth about the African god and all the ancestral wisdom that has been hidden for centuries. And since you've made it to the end, leave a comment saying, "I awakened to ancestral truth." This not only shows that you connected with the content, but also helps other viewers realize they are not alone in this spiritual quest. If this journey touched you deeply, please leave a like now. Your like is a way to support this work and ensure that more people have access to these revelations that are often ignored or hidden. And don't stop here. The next video appearing on your screen will take you even deeper into this story, revealing new discoveries and mysteries that will expand your understanding of African spirituality and the connection with the divine. Click now and continue this journey of awakening.